Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual session with Tijana. We're going to be talking about character creation distinctions in movies, games, and the metaverse. Tijana is our technical program manager and character animator with an exceptional background spanning the film, gaming, and the metaverse industries. Hi, Tijana. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Would you like to give like a brief introduction about yourself? I just said some basic things. Maybe you would like to give us a bit more details.
Yeah, sure. So I actually come from film and gaming industry. I finished a 3D animation, 3D modeling, rigging course in UK. And then I started working in film industry as 3D animator. I decided to move from film industry to more metaverse and gaming industry and started working in metaverse space 3 years ago. So then in the meantime, I switched from 3D animation to management. So now I work as a program manager in United, managing our internal projects and communicating with clients. I also help with animations and anything that's related to art whenever we have some need. And also, I teach at university in Serbia. I teach 3D animation, gaming, and film. So yeah, it's been very interesting in the past 3 years.
Great, thanks for the introduction. Okay, so what? Thank you. So what would you say are some challenges you encountered when creating characters in the metaverse specifically?
Well, there are a few challenges. One of the challenges is creating physically and emotionally realistic characters. In addition to being visually appealing, they should also be physically and emotionally realistic. Our characters should be interacting with the environment in a very natural way, and they should be able to show their emotions, which is sometimes very hard in for web-based platforms. Also, our characters, again, because we are on web browsers, need to be very optimized, meaning that although we want them to be very realistic, there are some challenges there. We also need to make sure that our characters are very inclusive so that we have different races, different body shapes, different hairstyles, so many variations of characters. We also need to make sure that we are looking at new technologies and new trends. So if there is any new technology out there, we should be implementing it immediately because, as I said, we are very limited with the technologies right now. And some of the realistic and high quality features of characters that we want to have in our worlds are challenged currently. So I think those are some of the main challenges that we have problems with right now.
I see. And since you work in the film industry, gaming, how can you explain to us how does character creation, for instance, in movies, differ from those in gaming or the metaverse?
So I'll just first ask, I think it's Andrea, can you please stop sharing your screen so that I can share mine? I would like to try to, maybe I can say play a game and
Uh-huh.
see what your answers will be. So let me just share my screen.
Mhm.
So, Yelena, I hope that you watched some cartoons and animated films. Do you
Of
know who
course,
these two characters are?
I do.
Do you know their names? And can you tell me something about them?
Yeah, so the first one is Mulan. She's a Disney character. She she actually like masked herself and presented herself to be a man so that she could like save her father from going to the army. It was one of my favorite cartoons when I was little. And the second one is Dory from Finding Nemo. So yeah,
And can you tell me something about their personalities? Just like one or two personalities.
their personalities. Okay, well, I would say that Mulan was very like courageous, very bold. Um, and when it comes to Dory, she's quite forgetful and funny. And everything about actually her character was extremely funny, like from the movements, from the ways like her eyes would appear, from her fins moving, all of that.
Okay, perfect. Now, can you tell me something about this character?
Okay, yeah, he looks very um, very tough, let's say, very muscular.
Okay,
So yeah, I would assume this is I don't know if it's Tekken or which game, but I would assume that this is from a game. It's not from a
okay.
cartoon or a movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like you can say that he's into like fighting, probably karate or
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Something like that. Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. Can you tell me something about this character?
Well, that character looks more realistic, more lifelike, I would say. Um, and I mean, I don't know if ordinary would be the right word, but it's more like relatable to us than, for instance, the other three characters, obviously. It's more realistic.
Okay, perfect. So right now I think we can do a comparison between these three. So when I asked you about the first two characters, you literally knew their names, you knew their personalities, meaning that when we create characters for movies, we need to create scripts, and those characters need to have a background story. And you can always say that Dory is forgetful, and that Mulan is brave. When it comes to games, it depends on the character, it depends on the game. If game is like, for example, Tekken, they create characters depending on their abilities. So this character needs to be probably very flexible because of karate. But again, we can also know his personalities or not. I haven't played Tekken that much, so I don't know, but I can see from the picture. The last one, like this character wasn't like created, it was customized. And that's how we create metaverse characters. We need to have million options because this character won't have a specific personality. For example, if I ask you what do you think about this character, you will probably say the same thing about about the previous character. But if you ask me, this is actually my character, Ready Player Me character that I use in United. And I can tell you more about this character because it's personal for me. So I would say that this character is very fun, very smart, sometimes maybe too talkative. Um, and yeah, so like this character actually has a lot of personalities. It's just specific for me. So I think that's the biggest difference between creating characters for films, games, and metaverse. And one other difference is the quality. So on the left here, you can see in the pink dress, you can see the character Ready Player Me, which doesn't have that many polygons. The hair is also made out of polygons. While on the right, we have a Disney character from Encanto who actually has real hair simulations and simulated clothes, additional VFX, additional number of polygons that we can see difference on the next two images. So the upper one is actually Ready Player Me, while the lower one is Moana from Disney. And you can see that Moana has many more polygons than the Ready Player Me character. So these are, I think, the biggest differences between characters for movies, games, and metaverse.
Okay, yeah, I love this presentation. You did an awesome job. So, would you say then, is it more challenging to create characters for the metaverse, for instance? I mean, it certainly looks like it,
I
but
would, Yeah, I would say yes. Well, depends on whose job it is. If you're writing a script, I think that's the most demanding job for film because you actually need to think about the background story a lot, and that's the biggest challenge. While when we're thinking about the metaverse characters, it's more like creating so many options, and from the technical side, how to combine all those options so that it has the same base, the same rig for all those options that we create, like millions of them. So it's different, but I would say that metaverse is more challenging.
Okay, thank you. And could you maybe summarize the character creation process for the metaverse, like from concept to final implementation?
Yes, so I have something here as well. This was just an example. I took few images from internet. So the process doesn't change that much between movies, games, and metaverse. It's very similar, but depending on the resources and the team, you would have maybe more steps in between. But usually all characters start with design. Again, for movies, it will be more personalized, many more details. When we do design for metaverse, it will be more, you won't be designing it with clothes. You'll just be designing different body shapes, maybe, and proportions. Then we go to the 3D department where they start modeling. Then after modeling, we start doing the texture so that character actually starts having colors. While we're doing the texturing, our rig department is creating rigs, meaning they are creating bone structure, and then they also create the controls so that animators can later on create the movements and animate those characters. What's different is for movies, we actually do the rendering and lighting in 3D softwares like Maya and Blender. Of course, we can use other softwares as well. While for Metaverse, from here, actually here, we need to export those models and animations and import them in Engine, in our case, in Unity. And then in Unity, we blend all them together again with animations, textures, and models. So all three come together again, and then you actually have a character. That's summed up.
Thank you. Okay, and can you tell me, like speaking of United, why do we use Ready Player Me avatars?
Um, so the overall goal, I think, for everyone when we talk about metaverse is to have one metaverse world. Then everyone else, all the other platforms, actually all platforms will unite and be able to move from one platform to a different one. So we actually wouldn't be different platforms. It would all just be one metaverse space. To be able to do that, we all need to have standardized characters with rigs so that you can move your character from one platform to another without problems. That's one of the challenges that our characters need to have. There are of course more companies that do characters, standardized characters. The reason why we decided to work with Ready Player Me exactly is because they've been here for long. Many companies use Ready Player Me characters. They do have a lot of customized options. You can also create your own clothes, customize them, and then implement them in Ready Player Me, which is amazing. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have our own avatars in the future. We're planning to do that. But for now, while we're developing our platform, easier to use Ready Player Me software.
I see. Okay, and what what influences the decision making about what kind of actions or animations a character will perform?
So this is one of my favorite topics because this is what I studied, and I come from 3D animation. So I would just mention two for now. One is differences in male-female animation. Well, we don't need to call it male-female. We can just call it differences in anatomy, let's say. So
Hmm.
just as an example, walk cycle. because everything, all the animations in the for games need to be in cycles, in loops. So it's around 30 to 35 frames. Because again, when we do characters for movies, then we can, depending on their personalities, then we create different animations. So, for example, if a character is drunk, then we would, create the walk so that he's going left and right. If character is very bossy and strong, like we would create a different walk where you can see from his walk that that's his personality. Here, unfortunately, we need to generalize the animations, because okay, in the future maybe we will create 10 different types of walks, more feminine, more masculine, slower, faster. But that means that the more animations that we add, the bigger the size of our platform will be, the files, and then it will work slower. So we need to find the balance between so generalizing animations, and adding million types of different animations. So that's why we always start with general animations. So we do, let's say, female and male walk, because they're mostly different because of anatomy. Women, I'm gonna play this video that you can see. So
Mm-hmm.
this is generalized walk. Keep that in mind. Of course, not all men will walk like this or women walk like this. But because of the anatomy that women have usually wider hips and more narrow shoulders, while men it's reversed. Women walk more moving their hips, while men walk more moving their upper body. Also, women walk more narrow, so more narrow steps, also shorter steps, and they walk faster, while men walk like wider steps and slower steps. So these are just
Mm-hmm.
some of the things we need to take into consideration when we're, animating a walk. And I love it because when I actually walk around, I love to look at people and to see how they walk because you will notice these differences. The other thing is psychology. I will just take example of idols. When I had to animate some idols for the platform, we were thinking, so what should characters do while they're waiting? What do we do when we're actually waiting for someone? Do you look at the watch? Do you yawn? Do you, like, oh, I'm bored? All of these movements are kind of negative. So we need to think about psychology because when you see someone that's yawning, it means that he's bored. And we don't want
Mm-hmm.
that feeling in our platform. Then we need to think
Yeah.
about, different movements that will also show that you're waiting, but that you're not bored. So although it looks very easy and simple, there is actually huge amount of thought process and research behind all of these movements. So I'll just leave it there. But while we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about animation, I actually wanted to do a quick quiz with you, actually with everyone that is here. You can actually write your answers in chat. So the first question is, in how many axes can we rotate the elbow? So we actually have three axes. So it would be X, Y, and Z. So what do you think, in how many axes can you rotate your elbow? You know, does anyone have
Um,
any idea? So it's one, two, or three? Three, Andrea. Okay, Yelena,
three.
what do you think? Hmm?
I would say three.
Okay, so the answer is one, because when you're actually moving your elbow, you're not moving your elbow, but your shoulder. So if you zoom in to my camera, the only way you can rotate your elbow is um, this, this axis. When you rotate it like this, you're actually rotating your shoulder. So just, we also need to think about that when we animate. Then the next question is, how many degrees, starting from the middle, to both sides can we rotate the wrist? So when I start from here, the middle, and rotate it to the front, how many degrees can I do that? What do you think? Anyone?
Um,
No, so like from 0 to 360 degrees. So we're talking in degrees.
just the wrist?
Yeah, just the wrist. So the
Yeah, the
answer
wrist.
is 118 total.
80?
Yeah, yeah. So, but like if we
Mm-hmm.
start from the middle to the front, then it would be 90 and the other side 90. So in total, it's 100. And the last question is
Mm-hmm.
how many degrees again can we rotate the head from left to right? Again in total. What do you think?
180?
Yes, you're right. 180.
Yeah.
So again, we need
Hey.
to think about these things because if we do move it more, then it would look like someone broke his neck. um, so yeah, that's it about animation.
All right, thank you. um, okay. And for instance, like in a rapidly evolving field like the metaverse, how do you navigate the balance between, let's say, creating unique, innovative characters while also catering to familiar archetypes that users can connect with?
Mm, so here, what it's a tricky question, but what we should think about here is do we actually, because we're actually business platform, right? So we want realistic avatars. The question is, do we think that all of our users actually want to have realistic avatars? What if someone wants to actually be a dog? Are we gonna restrain them to be a dog? Or the question is, okay, maybe we will restrain them, but what if we actually have realistic characters, but maybe do some changes to realistic characters and then add maybe parts of some robotic parts on characters. So that could be interesting because some people, when they create their avatars, want to create themselves, but you
Mm-hmm.
again have some people who actually want to run, get away from reality and be in the virtual world something that they can't be in the real world. So I
Yeah,
think that's some of the questions that we need to think about. Would we allow our users to be something else, or are we gonna stick to realistic? And that's something that we still need to answer, I think.
right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, creative expression is quite like important. Um, and it is a tricky question whether uh, we should keep it realistic or actually allow users to create whatever they'd like. If they'd like to have wings, let them have wings, etc. But yeah,
Yeah.
I get what you mean. Okay, and with the growing emphasis on inclusivity and diversity, how does character creation in the metaverse particularly contribute to representing a wide range of cultures, identities, abilities, etc.?
I think with technology improving and allowing to have millions of options, we will actually bring more people around the world to our platforms. You will see more and more people from different parts of the world joining the virtual spaces. What I think that we should focus on more is actually people with disabilities and characters with disabilities because I think that currently there are a lot of companies that do avatars with customization with different races, hair colors, body shapes, but I haven't seen that many companies that do also different kinds of disabled characters. So, for example, I think that we should have characters in wheelchairs. I think that we should have characters that are hearing impaired. So, what if our characters knew how to do sign language? I think that's very important, and I don't think that companies are focusing that much on that. And I hope that in future, when we start with our own characters, we focus on that a lot. So yeah, I think it's a very positive effect on overall global world and people starting to use virtual spaces because they feel more comfortable to see that there are characters that look like them and can represent them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Um, okay, and now could you maybe provide some insights into the software tools or technologies that are commonly used for character creation? Um, how, and like tell us like how do these tools impact the workflow, and do you maybe have any recommendations for people who are interested in getting into this field?
Sure. So I will just quickly go back because I think this is kind of connected to this slide with the process
Hmm.
of creating characters. Overall, when you start working on characters, of course, it's Photoshop for design, or any kind of any 2D software where you can actually draw and create designs. So it doesn't need to be Photoshop. Then when we move to 3D creation, I think Maya, Autodesk Maya is still the industry standard software, which I started with as well. But more and more we see that people use Blender because Blender is a free software. And lately, they started creating so many tutorials and help for problems and issues. So I think we will see Blender much more often now. So I think if you're starting to learn animation and you don't have enough resources to pay Autodesk Maya because it can be very expensive, I would highly recommend Blender. For example, Ready Player Me is also recommending Blender. So if you are doing freelance, if you're doing working in Metaverse space, I think Blender is totally fine. While probably if you're working for specific companies that have their process and pipelines, it's hard to switch from software to software. So they will probably be using Maya because it's been longer in the industry. For textures, I would recommend Substance Painter. Although I am not very proficient in texturing, but I know that people usually use Substance Painter. And then when it comes to creation of games, I would, depending on what you want, if you want a web-based platform, of course, Unity. And then if you're more into games that are not web-based, maybe Unreal.
Okay, thank you. I think that's going to be very valuable advice for people looking to get into the field. And well, since we're running out of time, I just have one last question for you. And I think you might have answered it briefly in the beginning, but what would you say is the most challenging aspect of character creation?
Um, well, there are a few, but what I would like to focus here on is actually Uncanny Valley. And I think that will be very
Mhm.
interesting for anyone to hear about if you haven't heard about if you haven't heard about Uncanny Valley before. Um, I would just like to ask you, Yelena, what do you like? What kind of feeling do you have when you see these animations and characters? Do they look very realistic to you and natural?
Well, some of them. I mean, they do look quite real. Yes.
Would you be able? Would you? Sorry. Would you be able to say when you see them that, for example, this is a real human?
Uh, well, for instance, particularly for the middle video of the female,
Yeah.
I would think she's real. But for instance, for the image on the right, she doesn't look very real because her eyes are like very, very big.
Okay. So uncanny valley is something that we are, you know, a big problem in industry in the past 20 years because people are trying to create as realistic characters as possible. But the problem is that we as humans, when we look at other people, the main focus is actually face. And we are actually very familiar with faces, and we can see every part of the face that is not perfect. And you can see if something is not human, or if it is, of course. So the industry has been struggling with the balance between creating the realistic characters using motion capture and them being not very realistic, actually. So these two examples are actually, I'm sorry, yeah, it's showing very slow. But these two examples are from Mami and from Polar Express. And they've been using motion capture to create, you know, movement and realistic faces. And people were not reacting very positive to it. This is Alita, and it's actually had very negative comments about, again, creating realistic face, because it does kind of look realistic, but sometimes it feels very uncomfortable to watch it because they tried really hard to create it realistic, but it's still not. In the middle, we have one, it's called MetaHuman. Uh, they create MetaHumans again using scanning and motion capture. I think here on this screen, when you see it, it might look realistic, but actually, when I can zoom in here on my laptop, you can actually see the imperfections. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we will have, especially since we've been talking about this, because we do want our characters to be realistic, to have realistic movements, to have realistic looks. But I don't think the technology right now is still there. Of course, we will try everything to actually come to the level of perfection that that everyone is expecting. But I think that will come in the next few years. So yeah, I think you know all the other things that I mentioned in question number one. I think this will be the biggest challenge of all.
Yeah, it makes sense. I can see why it's quite complicated to achieve a very realistic look, let's say. Okay, well, thank you
Yeah.
very much for your time. It has been a very interesting and insightful session, I'd say. Um,
Mhm.
if we
Okay.
have any questions from anyone in the audience, you can write it in the chat below. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, Tijana.
Thank you, and thank you for participating and answering questions. I know you haven't expected that.
Yeah, that was a nice surprise.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right, well, I think we can wrap this up then. Uh, Thank you everyone for joining us, and see you next Friday.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Well done. Nice one, Tijana.
Thank
It was
you.